I'm going to start out today by just giving you all a little bit of background that this is a preparation for a job talk that I will be giving this coming week. And so some parts of it may be very complicated and complex. Feel free to stop me to ask for clarification. I'm totally fine with that. I'm happy to do that. So, but I will be going through this kind of as a script, so you may have to kind of be sure to flag me down. So let's get started. Good afternoon. Thank you to the search committee members for bringing me to campus, and thank you to everyone who came to hear my research presentation today. I'm a critical intercultural and performance scholar, and today I'll be speaking about queer femme identity and intercultural communication. In this talk, I'll be exploring queer femininity from the perspective of performance, and we'll be relating it to intersectionality. I will show that queer femmes experience simultaneous privilege and disadvantage, and ultimately argue that queer femmes add the identities of gender and sexuality minorities to intercultural communication research, which has traditionally focused on race, ethnicity, and nationality. First, I will briefly discuss my topic. Then I will state the research questions that framed my project. Then I will discuss my methodologies and provide vignettes from interviews that I conducted in 2012. Then I will analyze them through the lens of intersectionality, and I will state the significant findings of my research. Next, I point to future research projects and offer concluding remarks about where this research is going. So the topic is queer femme identity and intercultural communication. And to give a little background on what I mean when I'm talking about femmes or queer femmes, it was the idea that starting in the 20th century, femme was a word to describe a feminine expressing lesbian woman, usually within a butch femme community. They were generally working class folks, and it was in the United States. Okay, so then the 1970s hit, and basically second wave feminism took over, and with that, the idea that performing in any sort of feminine way became associated with patriarchy, okay, and misogyny. And so many second wave feminists encouraged people that were expressing in feminine ways to downplay that femininity. Okay, so the butch femme scene started to dissipate in the 1970s. However, it had a resurgence in the 1990s after the sex wars, which is where third wave feminists began to speak back to the second wave and challenge their previously held notions that femininity, sexuality, even race and class and gender were negative things towards feminism. So with that, these 1990s femme radicals began to advocate for positive modes of gender expression for all people. Okay, so this is where we come to the contemporary definition of femme, and really there is no cohesive identity that femme actually relates to anymore. Okay? The contemporary femme movement contests the historical portrayals of femmes and suggests that femme should be its own gender identity category, and that no femme needs a butch counterpart like it was in the 1950s. Femmes are a community joined by a chosen identity, and they are not joined because of an essentialist identity, as many communities As you can see from the photo up here, there's a variety of different expressions of femininity. We see lots of fishnets and bright colors, tight skirts, but then also we see armpit hair and shorts and tank tops. And so there's no one thing that makes femme a femme. And that's where this talk is going, and it's intended to problematize the idea that femme is only about wearing skirts and dresses and other kind of frivolous, over-the-top things. While social norms may prescribe certain idealized femininity for women in general, femmes perform their identities in contested ways that are authentic to them, sometimes embodying the expectations of femininity and sometimes challenging them when they feel oppressive. I now turn to the research questions that framed my project, and I asked these to assess how femininities, or how queer femme identities, contest traditional discourses of intercultural communication. I first asked, what are the specific strategies and tactics queer femmes utilize in their everyday to perform their femme identity, and did these connect to politics and activism? My second question was, how do femmes communicate and perform their multiple and intersecting identities like race, class, sexuality, disability, and body size? To answer these questions, I did narrative performance analysis of 15 self-identified femmes. They were interviewed for 2 to 3 hours, and then they were revisited if I needed more clarification or understanding for an answer or for expansion of an answer. Throughout this process, I also engaged in what's called reflexive autoethnography. So reflexive autoethnography, which is a way to account for the researcher's positionality as a part of the community that they're studying. Okay. I chose narrative performance analysis and reflexive autoethnography because it allows researchers to see layers of meaning within a story, including context, emotion, and power. To analyze these narratives, I use the theoretical lenses of performance and intersectionality. I conceptualize performance as putting our bodies in relationship with one another in dialogic ways. So putting our bodies together through a dialogue, where we do not speak for others in our research, but instead speak with and to them. Secondly, intersectionality refers to the ways that race and class, gender identity, sexuality, gender performance, ethnicity, language, body size, and disability come together within systems of power to produce differing experiences, knowledges, and community affiliations. To examine intersectionality, I use the privilege-disadvantage dialectic in intercultural communication, whereby we examine how femmes simultaneously benefit from and are oppressed by cultural systems of which they are a part, thus advocating for queer femmes' significance in intercultural communication. Okay, so the next place that I want to go is getting into this dialectical tension of privilege and disadvantage. So there's a misconception within the queer community and society at large that femmes have this privilege of being able to pass as heterosexual women in society. We see this in different media portrayals like the L Word, newer shows like The Fosters, where we see women who perform feminine identities and it looks like they're just straight women. And in the queer community, there's privilege associated with that. However, this doesn't take into account that femininity in and of itself is an oppressed identity category. So to examine this, I went to one of my interview participants, Alyssa, and she explains the tensions that femmes experience for their femme identities. This is from the actual interview transcript. Alyssa answers the door, bird-like, her head bobbing and weaving as though separated from her body somehow. Dark hair brushed upward into a perfect tuft on top of her head. The rest is shaved with diagonal lines through it in a fade. Her hair accentuates her prominent features, light white skin, piercing dark eyes, a square jaw with high cheekbones. She is beautiful, almost statuesque. She is wearing a red leopard bustier, which shows off her bright tattoo sleeves. She tells me that she was going to wear sweatpants when I arrived to her home for the interview, but that putting on a sassy outfit just perked up her mood. She is tired, just having returned from a femme weekend in the Bay Area of San Francisco. Her suitcase has yet to be unpacked. She tells me she hasn't even had time to put on her makeup yet, but assures me that it will happen at some point during the interview. I ask her to tell me about herself, her femme identity, how she expresses. She responds after a few seconds of silence. There's totally privileges attached to being this gender and expressing in a certain way, but I feel like within a lot of queer communities, trans-masculine folks find it really easy to talk about them as experiencing privilege, which does not acknowledge the ways in which, particularly with someone who expresses like me, is harassed on the street all the time. I mean, I get followed by men all the time. Recently, I've been getting followed more, which is a lot scarier for me. Alyssa's words perform the important function of problematizing femme identity as one that is solely privileged. Those who perform a femme identity are subjected to oppressive behaviors from society, including harassment and violence. Two things that are generally not associated with privilege. While Alyssa definitely has privilege for being white and biologically female, her feminine expression has been used to justify harassment, violence, and sexual assault on her body in multiple occasions. And while it has mostly been from people outside the queer community, she also tells me, I've been to a queer dance party, and I've been cornered by people and grabbed a lot by queer people. That's hard to deal with in spaces that are supposed to be queer spaces, that are supposed to be safer spaces. Even in intentional communities like the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community, there are no safer spaces. There is no completely safe space. While masculine queers and butch lesbians may have a fear when interacting with the outside, more mainstream culture, femmes not only have to worry about violence from those outside communities and society, but they also have to worry about violence from within their own communities. The potential for violence is one way that power is maintained by people in control.